Alright, hi everyone. I'm Mikinaak Migwans, also known as Crystal Migwans. I'm happy to be back. I'm happy to be back. I'm going to try to speak just quickly. There's a project that's ongoing, research project that has to do with the revitalization of lived natural lineal knowledges from museum examples. And I wanted to connect it today to the topic of governance, the topic of treaty making. And I want to talk about the kind of the obscure role that women have always had in governance, right? In land relations. And I want to make a suggestion for how we can go about reimagining those relations in a present day context. The first thing I want to start with is just these two words, which I've talked with Alan about, and we've come up with how we're going to do this. The word Naknagewa, which we might know as governance, treaty making, okay? I want to connect this in kind of a punny way with the word for map making, which is the subject of my research. Nakmigan, right? Nakmigan, that's map making, Lorish maps, Maknashon. I'm going to go through the etymology of this a bit, but I want to make that connection there. I know it's not the exact same word, Nakmigan, Nakmigan, and Nakmigan, because the maps and the governance, but I want to propose this as a site of intervention into our understanding of what governance is, right? So, bear with me. First, let's talk about Naknagaran, right? And let's talk about the role of the mat and the bulrush mat, which I'll explain a bit more what the bulrush mat that I'm talking about is in a second. We've been listening to people talk about these treaty belts. We've talked about treaty discourse over the past couple of days. And I want to call attention to some of this kind of very evocative language that we've been using in some of those treaty speeches, all right? Because before all else, those treaties are spoken. And they're spoken using these metaphorical, symbolic concepts, these allegories that are about how our relationship on land is supposed to work. Some of those metaphors have been about, we heard Ken Miracle yesterday talking about, I take this when he's using the belt, the wampum belt, which again, wampum belt is not the best term for it. But I take this mat and I lay it down for us. And so talking about treaty as a mat that is laid down on the ground so that it creates a shared territory. And we sit down together on this mat and we usually the speech goes, we smoke together, we share words together. Within that symbolic language, I think that the idea of putting down the mat as a place where treaty relations can begin to happen is very significant. And so one example here that I like to bring up is this Chief of Signac in the proceedings of the 1862 Manitoulin Treaty, which we've been hearing. This is the treaty profane treaty, I think, as Patrick was referring to it. It was at this time when they were bringing these ideas up, and these ideas that are very much in counter to the original idea of sharing of relations on this land. Chief of Signac brought out the belts and he recited some of the promises that were made at the time of these original treaties. With the belts, he said, I'm going to recite to you the promises. We have never forgotten these promises. And he spoke using a kind of metaphorical language that is very important. So it's not just about conveying this kind of, in this fancy way, what was said. The idea is the kind of picture that's put in your mind in those treaty proceedings is very important to how those relations go about. So he said, I'm not going to try to say it in Anishinaabe because I'm not that fluent yet. But the translation of it from the Anishinaabe is, you said again, he says, trying to remind him of the promises, here I plant a tree in the center of your little island, and I sweep the place about this tree, and I lay down a mat. So Chief of Signac here is speaking about some kinds of labor that go into treaty making that I think are missing in how we talk about treaty today. And I think that a large part of what those ideas bring about is the labor that women do, the foundational work that women have done and continue to do, even unrecognized, in treaty relations, not only between human nations, but I also want to suggest between the human and the non-human, between human and the land itself. The land is a treaty, partner in treaty, right? So the idea of preparing the ground that you take within this territory, you sweep the place, you prepare the ground, you lay down a mat. This is also how you create a wigwam, right? This is how you set up a site. This is how you make territory. This is how you make your home in a place. Is you sweep the land, you lay down a mat, And then usually you have sit on the mat together and you smoke together and you share words. Okay? So from this, I'll just mention here. So on the belt that I've seen, it's not very visible from where you guys are. The mat is also something that Alan has spoken about in past in some of his articles. The imagery on the wampum belts, there's often something that is there's different kinds of iconographic clues that indicate different nations. So if you have a treaty between different nations, you might have a number of symbols that mean what those nations are. And some of those might represent a mat. They might represent the ways that mat identifies a group of people, usually related by lineally, right, by family. But the mat is a way of encapsulating what territory might look like, right? Another way might be the council fire, right? We talk about nations in terms of different fires. We can talk about people, like sometimes the nations are represented by people, and sometimes they're represented by this square that kind of correlates with, in the treaty talk, the mat that is laid down and that we sit on together as family. All right, so I want to connect that to the actual mat. What is the mat that I'm talking about, all right? So it's not just, we're thinking about a carpet in our house. And it's not, a carpet in our house is not really something we think about when we are living our life. It's something that is so daily, right? So part of literally just the household that's around us. We don't think of it as an object that is active. We don't think of it as part of as something that came about of a considerable labor, a life-giving labor. But there was a time when our houses, everything that kept us alive was woven by women, by teams of women, and how this knowledge that kept us, that encapsulated us every day, and crucially allowed us to move between sites like these mats, as I will discuss, are a technology of mobility within an environment. So a sovereignty that is not fixed in place as colonial settlement wished us to be, but mobile on the landscape because it was in relation with the landscape in such a close-knit way. Okay, so here we can see one, just an example of a fellow with kind of the the accoutrements of chiefhood. He's standing on one of these mats that I'm going to be talking about, right? And it's this kind of mat that is placed on the ground and that we come and sit on together that I want to suggest as a part of the process of Naknagalen. All right, so first of all, the Naknagalen that is associated with the bull rush. Naknashko is bull rush. It's not something we're really familiar with anymore because I think the ecological effects of colonization is so actively being kind of choked out in many places that this is a material that is so foundational to the health of our waterways and to the health of all of the creatures that we depend on and have depended on for so long, right? It's key to the ecology of Great Lakes wetlands especially. It's something that Renee Wasson-Dillard, who is a partner in his research, has called the first water protector. Okay, the bull rush is something that takes up those toxins, and I think the state of the bull rush today, the sickness of it, kind of maps. We should take that as an indicator of our own health, physically and as a nation. I think these water protectors are key to the health of the land that we live on, right, and our relationship to it. And historically, in the period of research that I'm pursuing in the 19th and 20th century, this was a period of time when we hear that the nation-to-nation relationship was really breaking down, and colonial settlement was ramping up, right? And so these mobile lifeways of our people were being actively targeted for elimination. And I think one of the ways that the colonial government went about this was by interrupting the natural lineal descent of the knowledge of these land-based lifeways, okay? And disrupting our relationship to the land in the ways that we know how to kind of be in relationship with the land and water in an ongoing way, right? Just through the daily unrecognized labor of the women who not only made mats, but spent all that time out there in the water, being in relation, walking the land, right? So being on the land and walking on the land and noticing and being in relation with this non-human being, right, was part of what women did, and it was important, it was so valued and so recognized, right? So the bull rush, the Naknashko, is a key partner in land-based lifeways for Anishinaabe, and it's a relationship that is maintained by women through a number of practices. I think weaving is an important one of those, right? Because the weaving of these mats was what was the foundational piece of the lodge, of the wigwam, of the mobile unit that's around which our kind of our mobile life is, our specific style of sovereignty was made possible. Right? So here we have an image, sort of small. The dissertation will be done sometime, and you'll be able to see all these pictures in print. But until then, this is a beautiful painting of a team of women weaving a mat. Okay, so Mikinaak, a boros mat, is the one placed on the floor of the wigwam. All right, and it's important in a number of ways. Materially, it's a grass. Okay, so we're thinking of cattails are mats that were placed around the outside of the wigwam. Right, so they're the ones that cover and deflect the rain. Those are important as well. But the bulrush is the one that is so foundational because it is the thing that facilitates relations between literally our bodies and the earth. All right, it insulates us. It's a cushion, and it's a moisture barrier. It maintains our relationship to land and water in a very specific way, even just on the level of moisture from our bodies and the moisture from the earth being mediated. Right, it has been part of our body, the thing that is next to our body, between us and the earth for so long. It's also important because it is a technology of mobility. All right, our style of sovereignty during this period of time I was studying in the 19th century. Mobility was important to our health and our relationship to the land, right? Not being fixed in space was our strategy of being in good relationship with the land. Seasonality, so moving between places. And the women were the ones who made these technologies of mobility, these mats, which could be picked up, everything rolled up in them, and you carried them to the next place. It was the women who carried them, right? This is also important because these is a matrilineal kind of knowledge, all right? So we talk often about, we categorize cultures, I think, in an anthropological sense in terms of this culture is patrilineal, this culture is matrilineal, and they're thinking in the realm of external governance, right? So we often think clan is passed down through the male line, clan is passed down through the female line. In either case, knowledge is passed on from mother to daughter, mother to son, and mother's knowledges are passed down. There are lines of matrilineal descent to these knowledges, and those are critical. All right, we don't inherit things just from one side. So these kinds of connections are carried on materially from the practices we learn, not only from our mothers, because it's not just a genetic connection. It is a social connection between and among women, especially among groups, teams of women and their sisters, women and their mothers, and being able to be in relationship with their sisters, with their mothers, and having those relationships around them. That was a key to, again, part of what kept us alive. And so again, when colonization was seeking to intervene in these kinds of relationships, making sure that women were kind of isolated into households and not considered to be part of the family with their sisters, with their mothers in an ongoing way. That's part of what allowed us to be contained and controlled, I think. I also want to point to the role that the mat plays discursively in the creation of the imagining of not only the Anishinaabe household or the family unit as the basis of our kind of larger nations and our larger sense of governance, but it's the mat even in our style of marriage, the mat was the site where two people came together and made a family. All right, and when you make a wigwam, that's what you do. You have two people come together, and you sit on the mat together, and that becomes a whole world, right? There's an agreement there. This became, I think, there's a complicated way that this can become part of the treaty-making discourse, but there is this concept of having a piece of territory, a prepared place that has been made through the labor of the woman and her family, her larger extended family, and then occupying that space and speaking. The labor of making comes before speaking, even, I think. And we say that speaking comes before the treaty, but I think there's a mat came before that. So when we're talking about our communities and what it is to be family and sharing space, we need to think about what it is, about who it is that has made that possible for us to be in a space together, right? I'll go quickly through the next bit. I'm not sure how much time I got left, but I'll just to show you some examples of, I got 5 minutes. Not to do that. We can do something there. Right? I want to introduce a couple of ladies and some of the works they did. And maybe some of the ways we can learn from them. One of these ladies is Wagos. It's Mary Martin from Lac Coudray out there. What she's doing here, you can see her sitting. She's got one of her mats, and she's sitting on the ground. What she's doing, she's actually she's making basswood twine, right? She's doing something that was kind of one of the main occupations for women before manufactured goods became available to us, which was making cordage that was necessary for everything. So she's taking from the basswood tree and she's making cordage, and she's doing it on her leg, right? She's spinning on her leg. She's doing a beautiful job. She's wearing a beautiful dress, and she's a wonderful woman. After she's demonstrating that, you can also see her on the right demonstrating the weaving of a mat. And here she's doing it outside on a crossbar in the kind of in the cool shade. And she's going about this pattern, and she's weaving it one row at a time, right? And out of that comes this. So this is a mat. This is a bulrush mat. So this is the kind of mat I'm talking about that goes on the floor of the wigwam. It is laid down, and then the family sits upon it. And who sits on the mat with you? When you invite somebody inside, you invite them to sit on your mat, and you're inviting them to even temporarily be part of your family. You're under the protection. Everyone shares the food that's in there when you're on that mat together. And I think that part of my research has been to track the kind of the mat as a site of kind of women's inheritance, because it seems that when these women were marrying into different communities, they would have mats, and if you asked them, "Oh, where's this mat from?" she would tell you, "Oh, it's from where she was born," right? So if the mat style that she brought with her was connected somehow intrinsically to the site of her mother's wigwam, right? And she brought that, even if it was just a pattern, she brought that with her into her new marriage. And this site, this place where everyone is sitting on, is in some way that place where she was born that has been brought here. It is in a sense her mother's mat. This is a mat that Renee Wasson Dillard and I looked at together, and we realized that the edge was like a little bit crumpled. Sometimes the selvage, the kind of finishing edge, it's usually nice and smooth, and this one was all crumpled up, and we realized that this is an older mat that this woman had re-selvaged. So she brought it with her. It was somebody's mat that she rewove. What Wassons also can tell, and I can't yet, just by the pattern of weaving, whose mat it is. Like the women seem to weave a pattern into their selvages that they could identify themselves, or they could identify their mothers or their sisters' patterns. And so this was a related weaving selvage, but it wasn't exactly the same as the original selvage. So this is a descendant that is remade, that is fixed up her mother's mat. There's another one that is from, this is an Odawa example. This is from Harbor Springs there. I also want to just call attention to the designs on these. I think the designs are they're the easiest part of the mat to access because they do have designs on them, but it's not the most important part of what the mat does for us, right? The important part of what the mat does is that it allows us to interface with the earth, right? It's that site of contact between our bodies and the earth. But also, the mat becomes a site where meaning is made and where designs are put. And they're not only about the women making designs that they associate with their own matrilineal knowledges, but they also, they have very specific, they seem to have a relationship with the, you see those woven bags that you see sometimes with very powerful cosmological images on them. We often see that with mats, and sometimes mats were made for specific sites and specific purposes. So I've seen mats that were created to be what a drum sits on. And they were very special in their iconography because the act of putting the mat down and unrolling it was so symbolic of opening that space and making the ground ready for that little boy drum to sit on, right? That was so symbolic that opening it up and revealing the iconography on that mat was part of what made that space special for that drum. So something like this, which is still quite abstract, but once you get into it, it involves these kinds of abstractions, these eye-dazzling abstractions that don't have a particular image within them, but this kind of the interaction of these different patterns creates this kind of this eye-dazzling, this mesmerizing surface. Sometimes, though, there are images. So there are images, I don't know, you can't see it here, but again, check for the dissertation and or the book in about 10 years' time, and you'll be able to see this. What's going on here is there's a mat here. there are 4 Mishipishu hidden in this mat. But you wouldn't be able to see it unless you were, I think, sitting down and looking at it and kind of engaging with it for a long time. There's this kind of, they're hidden within this kind of like the eye dazzle part in the center, and the point of it is that you sit down, and as it moves and as you move around the mat, it kind of reveals itself to you. Another kind of use that I want to suggest before we depart is not the same kind of mat we made. I encounter a lot of these miniature mats, which seem to be the kind of outer bundle, the wrapping of a bundle, because that's another kind of very significant thing that happens is when you open your bundle. And so when you open it and you lay everything out, the first thing you want to do is make a space for those tools, those partners, because those are animate partners to occupy. And so the mat that is rolled out, I've often seen like Thunderbird and others very significant images, but like hidden in an eye dazzle way in this mat, this tiny mat that is the final kind of outer layer of a medicine bundle. And so when it's unrolled, you suddenly there's like, you look at it for a while and you're like, what is that? It kind of hurts your head, and then it reveals itself once you sit with it for long enough. So that opening that space is kind of doing something like creating a space for those medicine partners to help you work. So that's one way. I think maybe the larger mats are really difficult for us right now, but maybe we can institute those the bundle wraps again. In either case, I think the important part of reclaiming this kind of governance style that actually begins in the labor that women do, right? It begins with reclaiming these kind of first of all the values, the kind of everything that is invested in women's lineages, women's knowledges that are passed down, and just the importance of women's relational networks, of their sisters, of their mothers, of their friends, and being able to be together and be able to work together is so important. And reclaiming that in a certain way has to do with reclaiming the techniques and remembering how to actually go out into the water, recognize are these bulrushes are the partners, are the non-human partners that are supporting us, are they well? Are we holding up our end of our agreement with them? Because we do have an agreement with the land, with the water, and how do we maintain our relationship with those things? Right? It is, I think, in the course of talking about our treaties, our nation-to-nation relationships with the settler government of Canada, our prior agreements are increasingly forgotten. And I think that when we talk about land and reclaiming land in terms of trying to reclaim property, I think that's the way that we start to go amiss a little bit. We need to be able to remember what it was, who it was that we made these agreements with before the land was property, right? So I'm going to end with that and walk through the dissertation.